Welcome, friends, to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon. Guys and girls, you know the drill. I'm a retired New York City police detective, and if you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you'll get all things DutyRon and Ed Wallace when we go live or upload another video. Tonight, we're going to talk to you about the Bryan Kohberger Search Warrant return. This is the warrant that they executed on December 30th in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. They had a certain amount of time in the state of Pennsylvania. I believe it was 60 days. Here in New York State, we had 10 days to get our search warrants returned. I worked in the warrant division. I wear this shirt a lot when I do these lives. I'm very proud of the job that I did as a New York City police officer and a detective. And that was what we had. Our time constraint was a little bit shorter. It was 10 days. But we're going to get into it tonight. But before we get into it, I want to say a special thank you to you, the Patreon supporters, the channel members, all of the folks who positively engage in this community. You guys are what makes this a great place. And I give thanks and praise to each and every one of you. Your questions, your comments, your knowledge, thanks to the schooling and teaching from Ed Wallace, is second to none. When I go on to some of the other YouTube streets and I see and hear the comments that are coming out and going around, I look at what we have going on here, and you guys are really well educated in the behind the scenes, not just from the detective's perspective, but you're getting the lawyers. We got a great guest for you tonight, a returning guest, Pete Crusco. He is a former prosecutor, now a criminal defense attorney. He's going to come live with us tonight and give the lawyer reaction to the search warrant return and what they found and what possibly they might find going forward. So before we get into it, I want to play a little piece for you tonight. But if you hold your questions to the end of this program, at the last 15 minutes, I'm going to open up the phone lines and I'm going to read out some of your questions. You guys sent in a bunch of questions, and I'm going to read out the questions that you guys sent to our guest. But let's quickly play a short overview so you guys know what we're going to talk about tonight. And this has been well spoken about across the YouTube streets, but we brought in a professional, as we always like to do, to answer some of these questions. So let's take a listen to what Brian Entin has to say about Bryan Kohberger.
Details on a story News Nation has been on since the very beginning. Today, we are learning what police found when they arrested Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger. We were there on the ground when that search happened months ago. Brian Entin was the first on the ground in Pennsylvania near Kohberger's parents' home. Well, today, authorities unsealed the search warrant from that arrest. Let's bring in senior national correspondent Brian Entin. Brian, I know you've had a chance to pore over this document. What on this list caught your eye?
Yeah, Nicole. So we got a tip a few days ago that this would be unsealed soon. Didn't exactly know that it would happen today while we were here covering the Murdaugh trial, but very interesting that it was unsealed. Basically, this is the search warrant from when police arrested Bryan Kohberger. You remember he was at his parents' home in Pennsylvania when the arrest went down. And in the search warrant, there is a list of the items that they found on his body. And they include shoes, socks, medical-style gloves, which is something that really stood out to me, a jacket, size 13 shoes, and then swabs, which we assume are swabs that were used to take his DNA. You also see their socks, shorts, boxers, basically everything that he was wearing was seized as part of that search warrant when the arrest happened. But what's interesting, Nicole, is we know that they also searched the parents' house in Pennsylvania. You'll remember when I showed up there, we could actually see that the glass was broken from when the police had busted inside. They did not reveal the list of what they took from the home in that unsealed warrant. So whether they got a cell phone or computer or anything like that, we still don't know at this point, Nicole.
And we know, Brian, there are supposed to be, or potentially could be, more documents unsealed, right?
Yeah, that's the word. And again, there's missing information from what was released today, because in the search warrant, it clearly says that not only did they search Bryan Kohberger's body and get those items that I just read off, like his clothing, but that they also went into the parents' house. but the property list of what was removed from the parents' house has yet to be released. So perhaps that is what is still coming. We're just going to have to wait to find out.
Well, Brian, before we let you go, where does the case stand right now? And where does what was revealed in this new document and the more that may be coming impact the case?
Yeah, and there's something actually interesting I just remembered that I forgot to tell you, Nicole, about what was in the document. It also talked about the surveillance that was done on Kohberger in detail. This new document that was released today basically said that they had been following him and monitoring him coming and going from his parents' house in Pennsylvania, and also that they were tracking his cell phone at that point. So that is new information that was in the document. And it's interesting we're able to get this stuff from Pennsylvania because there's no gag order in Pennsylvania. Remember, in Idaho, there's the gag order, which is why we're not going to get much more information from Idaho until the preliminary hearing sometime in June, Nicole.
Sometime in June. All right. Brian Entin reporting in South Carolina on the Murdoch.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's an overview of what we're going to get into tonight with our special guest. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to a returning customer, Pete Crusco. Thank you so much for joining. He is a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor on the state and federal level. His resume is a mile long. I don't have time to read it, but thank you for coming back, Pete.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, we got a lot going on in this case. There's so much to unpack. I got pages and pages of notes. We also have been following the Alec Murdaugh case, and I know that any good lawyer out there is listening to what's going on. It's kind of hard not to hear anything about that. But before we wrap up tonight, I want to, if you don't mind, pick your brain apart a little bit on that case and get some of your thoughts. Would you mind?
Sure.
Excellent. I love it. I love someone who's always willing to comply. So Pete,
where the cuffs? Where the cuffs?
I leave the cuffs over there. I leave them in the corner. Pete, so search warrant return, pretty basics. Some of the things that we had to do in the warrant division when I worked there, and we did these search warrants. 9 different items came out of this search warrant. I have a ton of questions, but before I get into the questions, what's your thoughts on where this case is going? We have, the preliminary hearing on June 26th. A lot of people aren't even sure of what we're going to get out of that preliminary hearing. Can you walk the audience through this judicial process and where we're at in this thing?
Well, generally speaking, a preliminary hearing is the time for which the prosecutor has to demonstrate probable cause that a crime was committed and this person that they arrested committed the crime. The standard is only probable cause. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's what we call prima facie evidence, prima facie case, the first step.
Right.
And that is usually sufficient then to hold him pending indictment for trial. So that's generally what we're talking about.
And how much are we going to hear at a probable cause for Bryan Kohberger? We already have the unsealing of the search warrant back in Pullman, Washington. They got his computers and a whole bunch of stuff that was listed there. We're going to get into this 9-item recovery that they made at the search warrant location in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. But how deep will they go in this preliminary hearing? Will there be a ton more evidence, or is the prosecution going to hold what they got back? And a couple of people have asked me on many different occasions, Pete, is all of the prosecutor's evidence, the state's evidence, is that already given over to the defense team, or is that a process that has to happen after the preliminary? And excuse me if that sounds stupid, but it was a question that I got in.
No, I've been checking the court file. It doesn't appear that there's been in-depth discovery. Usually, right before the hearing, the preliminary hearing, there has to be a transfer of any evidence related to what the prosecutor is going to put forth at the preliminary hearing, prior statements of witnesses, anything that might be referred to during the witness's testimony. So generally speaking, the preliminary hearing, you make your case, but you don't go any more than necessary because you don't want to give that much discovery, depending upon what might come about in the future concerning, scientific evidence, any forensic evidence, people who may come forward. So you have to, keep the cards pretty close to the vest, because you never know where the road will lead you, and you don't have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt at the preliminary hearing. It's prima facie case, probable cause.
Right.
So that's the usual situation. You don't want to go, because the more you reveal, the more the defense can ask for, and the more that you'll have to disclose.
Right. And that brings me to another point that I wanted to bring up later in the show, but since you just brought it up, keeping stuff close to the vest. The prosecution has, through the judge, issued a gag order. And that gag order initially was for the investigators, the prosecution, defense, anybody that's subpoenaed to testify and so forth, or anyone that has been issued a subpoena, or was a complainant, a witness, or people that were interviewed at the location and so forth, meaning the surviving roommates and such. How important is that because people are pissed off that there's this gag order, Pete, and now there's a challenge by not only the family of Kaylee Gonzalez, there's a challenge to the Idaho State Court by the news media to have these gag orders removed. Can you talk a little bit about how important that is with the wheels of justice to have this?
Yes. Well, there are constitutional issues that have to be balanced, but generally speaking, the priority is the defendant's right to a fair trial. And in the right to fair trial, one has to get a fair jury. And if the jury pool, the people who are going to be selected to sit on the jury, have been tainted because of the amount of press and the potential, wide-ranging speculation, you're going to make it harder to get a fair jury, and you're going to make it easier for the defense to argue that the case has to be moved to another county. And I think the last thing that anybody wants is, number one, to impinge upon the defendant's right to a fair trial. Number two, nobody wants to be shipped 300 miles away, because what would happen is they would ship the judge, and they would ship the attorneys and all the witnesses to the corner of the state where there's been no great amount of press on it. So there's several reasons why you don't want to allow crazy speculation to go on with a high-profile trial. The preeminent reason is you want to make sure that the defendant has a fair trial, and the people who are going to be reviewing the jurors, reviewing the evidence, haven't been tainted by the overabundance of speculation.
Yeah, and media coverage. And I was going to go into this later on, but now that we're on it, a lot of the media outlets are citing unverified sources, Pete. And these sources can be, as the media is stating, law enforcement close to the case, like close to the investigation is the wording that they use. Being that you were a prosecutor and you were on the prosecutorial side, and now you're, on the, you've seen both sides is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
What does the court do? I know you can only speak on where you were,
Right.
but what does the court do to uphold these gag orders, and how heavily will they look into these leaked sources? Ed Wallace and myself, and even Sergeant Bill Cannon from the Homicide Squad, we talk about these leaked sources, and we say they should be identified and brought in and punished for this. Can you talk a little bit about how upsetting that is to the prosecution when you hear about these leaks coming from sources close to the investigation?
Well, it's very disturbing, and I've had situations in the past regarding that, and it's troublesome because potentially the police officers risking, or someone else, perhaps in the DA's office, is risking their careers, because if it's shown that you will reveal confidential information in a case, obviously your integrity is an issue, and the likelihood that you are going to be put on a team involving a big case in the future is going to be quite remote. So besides that, certain information, if it's released, could put people in danger. It could also intimidate witnesses. The witnesses will say, well, what do I need this for? If all of a sudden he wakes up, or she wakes up in the morning, and there's 3 newspaper people knocking at their door wanting to interview them.
Mhm.
Or perhaps they get a nasty call from a relative of the defendant charged saying you better not testify or whatever, and or from somebody they don't even know.
Right.
So you cause all this not to occur, and you stop it from occurring by by issuing a gag order if you're the judge, and the judge is essentially intimidating all the people, saying you better not, because violation of a gag order is contempt. Contempt in New York is at least 30 days jail.
Criminal contempt, right?
Yes, criminal contempt, 30 days jail, $1,000 fine. And I've seen people issue contempt right on the spot by the judge. The judge will say, officers, take him in. The court officers will grab him and put him in the back, and he'll have to wait to appeal that.
Yeah, it's a direct remand, right? The judge says take charge.
Correct. Yep.
Court officers have to take him into custody. This is what I'm talking about, is when you are on the good side of the law, one would think that, in lieu of...
It's actually both sides are good sides, depending upon your perspective.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm talking about my perspective, Pete.
Okay, all right.
So when
your perspective controls.
Right, but seriously, I get what you're saying. I know it. There's both sides. But what I'm saying is it's hurtful to retired law enforcement like myself when we hear about these leaks, because I remember when I was in the warrant squad, and we would have these sensitive search warrants that we would conduct. We wouldn't even tell anybody that was in uniform. They called us the secret squirrel squad. And I keep mentioning this. So a lot of the officers resented that we wouldn't share information with them. And the reason we didn't want to share information with them is because we didn't want someone who had a girlfriend or had a friend or wanted to, go to the media and say, hey, just to get your little 5 minutes of fame.
Right.
So we were more concerned about serving justice and getting the bad people off the street. That
Absolutely.
was just the summary part of it, right? That's the beginning part of it. Now we're talking about the wheels of justice going forward. We have our suspect in custody. We now want to get, that true bill indictment, and we want to go and take it to trial and have a guilty verdict.
There's an old saying we used to say, which is, the case never gets any better than it is on the day you make the arrest.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's when everyone is optimistic as all heck.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you find out little pieces that, it wasn't what we thought, and this is that. And
it's just discouraging to hear someone from the side of what we would think is good try to spew out and leak out information to the press. Lori Callahan, thank you for becoming a member, and thank you to the super chatters that I missed, and another channel member who became a member. I highlighted them onto the screen. I don't like to break up the continuity of the show, so that's why I don't do them right as they're coming up. But Pete, so you kind of get my point. It's very frustrating probably for all involved, and I was going to get to that other part, the other side part. It's frustrating to the defense, because the defense now, even though it gives them a kind of a ground ball to say, hey, I can't get a fair trial here, and I want to apply for a change of venue for the following reasons. And one of those following reasons would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be saying that unconfirmed sources close to the investigation were leaking out to the press prior to the commencement of this trial.
Right.
Therefore, giving them a ground ball.
Yep.
Can you expand on that?
Well, look, remember the constitutional right is to a fair trial. If there is rumors, innuendo, speculation out there which is false, it's going to mean that much bigger of a hurdle to convince 12 people that they have to be fair and impartial, because they have to put that out of their minds.
Right.
Usually, the judge will require a juror to unequivocally state, that's U.S. Supreme Court, unequivocally state that they can be fair and impartial. And both sides usually, hammer that issue with each potential juror, and ask them, can you, despite everything you've heard, despite all the news media, despite all the rumors, despite all the innuendo, can you put that all aside and judge this case on its facts? And can a juror do that if they've been pounded with all the speculation and innuendo and rumors and gossip for the 6 months or a year before the trial even happens? And that becomes the problem.
Yeah, it becomes a major problem. And it just, with a gag order, it just seems to be compounded more. This is such more, the intensity level is so much higher in the speculation, rumors, and the people who are engaging in the speculation and rumors are pointing the finger at the gag order. So it's almost like, it's like one of these, like the people who are spewing it are saying, well, they're not telling us anything, so now we just have to make shit up, So,
Ron, as the counter argument that the media usually gives is that if you allow people to speak about the case, that the scrutiny that the public gives it will eventually burn off all the fat, and the truth will come out. That's a big gamble, though, and I don't think that's something that the judge lightly will decide.
Yeah, that's a big roll of the dice. Hey, Pete, I want to play, because I want to get into these 9 items that were returned on a search warrant. I want to play this little piece. It's only it's 2 minutes. This is going to go over, this is the Kohberger home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, as we know it, the Pocono Mountains. Have you been to beautiful Mount Airy Lodge at any point?
Yes, years ago.
I think we've all been there, right? With the
yes.
champagne glasses and so forth. I don't think it's still up and running, but this is in that region. So let's let this play, and then we'll be right back with you folks.
In a surprise pre-dawn raid in late December, law enforcement arresting Bryan Kohberger at his parents' Pennsylvania home, taking the suspect into custody after a 6-week manhunt.
Brian!
Now in a newly unsealed search warrant, we're learning what else authorities took from his family home that morning. Among the items, a flashlight and medical gloves, an assortment of clothing, including a black sweatshirt and black and white Nikes, and a cheek swab, presumably for the suspect's DNA. According to 2 sources familiar with the investigation, NBC News learned investigators used forensic genealogy to zero in on Kohberger, possibly using DNA.
Hey, Pete, I wanted to just stop it for a minute. I know you're taking notes, but did you hear what this reporter just said? According to a source close to the investigation.
Exactly.
It's just mind-blowing. And you hear this in every one of these reports.
Yep.
I'm gonna let the rest of this play. It's just less than a minute.
NBC News learned investigators used forensic genealogy to zero in on Kohberger, possibly using DNA recovered from a knife sheath found near the body of one of the victims. In a previous search of Kohberger's apartment in Washington State, investigators also gathered possible hair strands, chemical-resistant gloves, items that had red and brown stains, and a computer tower. In December, Kohberger had driven home with his father to Pennsylvania from Washington State University, where he was pursuing his PhD in criminal justice. On that trip, the pair were pulled over twice in Indiana weeks before the arrest.
How y'all doing today?
They were driving a white Hyundai Elantra, the same type of car police say was captured on surveillance video near the scene of the murders. Kohberger's school less than 10 miles from the University of Idaho, and the off-campus home where 4 students, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Maddie Mogan, were found stabbed to death on November 13th. A surviving roommate telling authorities she saw a figure dressed in black in the home that night. Now Kohberger is awaiting trial on 4 counts of first-degree murder. He has not formally entered a plea, but has said through a former attorney that he believes he will be exonerated. Meanwhile, the community of Moscow, Idaho, is trying to move forward.
I feel better, sort of, knowing that they have the suspect in custody, that there's a chance that this might all be behind us soon enough.
The university announcing the house where the murders happened will be demolished, calling it a healing step and a way to stop efforts to further sensationalize the crime scene.
And this is another thing I want to talk to you about. Pete, is the house being demolished. Before we go forward, I wanted to just talk about these 9 items that were recovered. And we heard it in this report. Again, twice they talked about the forensic genealogy coming from sources. And there's, I mean, I could sit here all night with you and talk about some of the sources that not only just Banfield and News Nation, she seems to be the leader in leading the charge, but news outlets from all different places are coming up with these sourced information. But any thoughts on that piece that I just played there, Pete?
Well, I think that the evidence that they seize, they're going to run through forensic databases and the whole 9 yards, looking for any type of matches, any type of evidence. So it's just more pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
So until the preliminary hearing, we don't know where the pieces fit. You'll get a little bit of that at the preliminary hearing.
Right. And people, again, for folks who don't know how this process goes, nobody on the defense or the prosecution side wants to fudge this case. They want to be able, like you said, to get a fair and impartial jury, and to also present their case within the letter of the law. There's all of these these timelines that they have to get information out. But these 9-line items, the Defiant silver flashlight. Okay, there's conversation all over the internet about the flashlight. Could this have been a flashlight that he used in the commission of these heinous murders? Yes, but we don't know. 4 medical style gloves in the previous search warrant at the Pullman location where his student housing was. They talked about different various medical types of gloves. They recovered 4. Now remember, these recoveries were the night of December 30th. The murders happened November 13th.
Right.
So it's a good distance from the time of these quadruple murders. A white Arizona Jean Company large T-shirt, a Champion Washington State University Cougars large black sweatshirt, a pair of black and white size 13 Nike shoes. This comes into play because a partial shoe wear foot imprint was recovered at the crime scene, in the crime scene location.
Yep.
Conversations are having, swelled and mushroomed into, are these the shoes? We won't know that until all of the forensics, as you just spoke about, are processed and come back. A pair of black Under Armour socks, Under Armour black large shorts, Under Armour black boxer shorts, and a forensic cheek swab. Now, you and I both spoke prior to the going live, and you said, I really didn't get a chance to read the search warrant. I read it online. I couldn't get it to download it. I know it is downloadable, but essentially it was spelled out in this search warrant to search for any and everything. So basically it was a no-knock search warrant. Sometimes when in the city, in the confines of the city, the judge would sign these search warrants and say between, I think it was 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., I believe, Pete, for the knock search warrants. But the no knocks was you could just execute it at any time. This one, they executed at 1:30 a.m., I believe.
Okay.
The very next day, they got it on the 29th in the afternoon, and then they tacked up, and the FBI and state police went out to this location along with representatives from the Moscow Police Department, executed this search warrant. They smashed in windows, flashbanged inside the house, and took him in to custody. There is probably numerous other items in the interior of that home. Mr. and Mrs. Kohberger, the parents, were probably detained in the process of the entry. I've seen this happen, everybody. If there was 5 family members or friends staying over, they'd all be face down, handcuffed, detained, until they could figure out what was going on. I wanted to talk to you about the cheek swab. right? So it's stated in the search warrant to get DNA. So a forensic cheek swab. You're looking at the sheath DNA, touch DNA on the sheath. They were talking prior to this that the father's DNA in the garbage was
Right.
what matched them back with the forensic genealogy to the defendant. How important is getting that cheek swab legally?
Absolutely. I mean, it would have had to have been ordered pursuant to a court order in the warrant or a supplementary warrant. But that is, that's that type of evidence requires a specific court order. So they had to have probable cause for that.
And what's mind blowing to me is that on 12/16 we saw that car stop in Indiana. Right, there was two of them.
Right.
That's 2 whole weeks after that car stop before this search warrant was executed. But they had eyes on Bryan Kohberger and his vehicle 2 weeks after the murders happened. So somewhere, and again, there was 2 Washington State University campus police officers who, in my eyes, are heroes. I have their names written down. I'll mention them in a few. They just took it upon themselves to, based on the bolo from 8 miles away from Moscow PD, they started running plates at night. And then there was also the lawyers that said, "Oh, that's unconstitutional." I want to ask you about that too, so don't let me forget that. So they were running plates randomly in the school parking lot. And I know that when my son went to state college, we had to register all our vehicles to get like a decal to park. Right. So I don't know about the constitutional right of whether the police officers were able to search for plates randomly, but be that as it may, putting that aside, those police officers did that some 2 weeks later after November 13th. So they had his vehicle and potentially him as a suspect December 1-ish, right?
Right.
So from December 1-ish to the 30th, 30 days to surveil a quadruple murder suspect. I mean, Pete, I don't know. I mean, I know I did my fair surveillances within the different units I was in the NYPD, and in the inner city, it is tough to surveil somebody for 12 hours.
Right.
Surveillance.
I don't know whether they have the capability. I mean, in New York City, the police department has plate reader cars that go all around the city all the time. And all that is constitutional. It's been determined to be constitutional because they're reading plates that are in public view. So to answer your prior question, generally speaking, it's all constitutional because whatever you can see with the human eye that's in public view, it's not a violation of the Fourth Amendment because it's not considered unreasonable search. Only unreasonable searches are prohibited under the Fourth Amendment, not reasonable searches.
So they have it on that one. And again, I felt that was a bang up job, what those 2 officers did on an overnight, just based on a bolo. I'm trying to find their names. If somebody can send me, if somebody has their names, I had it written down somewhere. If somebody can send me their names, just send it to me on one of the social medias or DM it to me. But these 2 police officers, to me, get the Hero of the Century award as far as this case goes, providing we get a guilty verdict. But so from December 1st to the 30th, somebody had to have had eyes on Kohberger.
Absolutely.
Putting these plate readers aside, Pete, because plate readers can help you to determine where he's traveled. But if you have suspicion that this guy could possibly be the perpetrator that committed a quadruple murder, I would think that you would want 24/7 surveillance on this guy. And I look at Brian Laundrie and the debacle that happened down in Northport, Florida, when the local police and the feds were involved in surveillance and cameras, and his mother was mistook for him, and he essentially just got away. That didn't happen in this case, but kudos to these local and state and federal police officers to keep tabs on this guy. And a lot of people are like, well, where did he go in that 30 days?
There's also another investigative tool that is little known, but it was revealed during the January 6th investigation by the FBI. It's called the geofence warrant. And essentially, when a phone goes into a certain location that the geofence is set up to surveil, it will be identified. Okay, so you can set up a geofence warrant within a certain perimeter, and then any phones that go into that perimeter, once you get the search warrant, of course, because it has been considered a Fourth Amendment issue, then all phones can be checked 24/7 during a certain time period.
Right. Yeah, and geofencing has been mentioned in this. I believe that that technology was utilized by the feds, or perhaps the Idaho State Crime Lab or the Idaho State Police. So, again, an important part of this thing. I got to just take a minute out here because my co-host, who is in India training, doing Army training, forensic training in India,
wow.
Ed Wallace, is in the chat, and it's his 60th birthday, or it was yesterday. I think, we're into a new day for him over there in India. So happy 60th birthday to Ed Wallace. He's in the chat, everybody. We did a little live stream earlier today. Wishing you many more healthy and happy. God bless, Ed. It's great to see you in the chat. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Ed.
Happy birthday. So I want to talk to you about a couple of these questions that were coming in. All right. The house, the Idaho State University took ownership of the 1122 King Road. That is the homicide location in Moscow,
Right.
Idaho. The house was turned over by the owners to the University of Idaho. And I played a little piece earlier in the week. They talked about 2 weeks demolishing that home. I have a clip queued up. I'm not going to play it because I want to get your opinion as a former prosecutor and as a criminal defense attorney. What are the pros and cons of this thing? And for our audience as well, in addition to this lengthy question I'm asking you, would it be a conversation that the defense and the prosecutors would have together before coming to this, allowing this demolition to happen, and the judge that's hearing this case, Pete?
Well, that would be the usual situation. Let me give you a similar situation, although not as horrendous. Since you were with the NYPD Detective Bureau, you probably know that in stolen car cases, the PD and the DA's office would hold the car for just about ever, because sometimes they would want to actually bring it into the courthouse. So, in fact, I had a case in which I brought the car into the courthouse.
The Whitestone Pound, right, Pete? The Whitestone Pound, that's where they stay.
We disassembled the car. We brought it into the basement. We had the jury look at it because in those days, organized crime was taking off all the VIN numbers. And the owner of the car could actually identify his car through certain marks. So there are certain times that you want the evidence to stay somewhere. You want it secured. You don't want it touched. I can only assume that in this particular case, since we don't have the inside story, that the defense was given the opportunity to do all the testing and all the inspecting that they wanted to, and the prosecution, allowed the house to be sold and transferred.
Wow.
But that's speculation, obviously, but reasoned speculation based upon otherwise it would not be transferred.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, here's my thing. This is the thought process, and I would have to say that the overwhelming majority of people that I have spoken with on this and have had communication with is everybody feels that this residence should be held, like you're talking about with the vehicles, should be held until the trial is complete. Because we know that 3D laser scanning was done by the state of the state crime lab. We have confirmatory. The police chief, Chief Fry, confirmed that. A representative from Faro Industries has confirmed that not only has the prosecution 3D laser scanned the interior and exterior of 1122 King Road, but the defense ordered 3D laser scanning from their crime scene expert. We saw him going in and out of that location about a month ago. This is now 2 months, after Bryan Kohberger was taken into custody. So just a short time later, we saw a crime scene specialist in 1122 King Road doing, the 3D laser scan. If this was your case, if you were, I'm going to say, if you were on the defense side, would you have opposition to this, and then if you were the prosecution, would you have opposition, or would it matter?
No, I'm very conservative when it comes to evidence. I don't want it to go anywhere. I want it to be under lock and key, because you never know what could come forward later, or what even scientific type of instrument they could develop. So I would not feel comfortable allowing it to go anywhere, and I would object wholeheartedly and vigorously. And because you see, if I object, I have now kept that issue for appeal. And now, if the judge made an error, that's an appealable issue that potentially could require a retrial in the future. Yeah. So object vigorously. That would be my point.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why in this live stream, I have lawyer reactions. The lawyer reactions, and we're getting it straight from a lawyer. And Pete worked both sides of this. I want to play this piece. This goes over the demolition of the location, and I want to just let you hear a little bit of some local coverage on this.
With an update from the University of Idaho, the owner of this King Road home where 4 University of Idaho students were murdered last year is now being donated to the university.
Today we have learned the school is going to demolish the home and create a healing garden and memorial for Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, and Madison. Krem 2 Shannon Mowdy has more tonight from Moscow.
Police tape still circles this entire scene, but there are signs of change at the King Road home in Moscow, Idaho, where 4 University of Idaho students were murdered. The university now owns this property and says it'll be torn down.
To get rid of that place that's so painful for our community. It's the place where these 4 students were brutally murdered, and the reminder still stands.
Now boarded up and blocked off with warnings against trespassers, the King Road home where Xana, Madison, Ethan, and Kaylee were killed is likely seeing its last winter.
We're hoping to begin demolition just as quickly as possible, and definitely would like to see it come down this semester.
Jody Walker says the University of Idaho hopes by spring this property will be leveled, discouraging those who are sensationalizing what's become a painful reminder for this community.
The owner of the King Road property approached the university about receiving the home, and the university accepted that donation.
While one reminder is coming down, the University of Idaho will be far from forgetting.
We absolutely have students on the planning committee for this. It is important that we have students. This is a space for them.
A memorial and healing garden is being planned. So far, no site has been selected, but Walker says it's a...
Now, I saw another report where they said 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, they want to demolish this. She's talking about in the spring. That wouldn't even bring us into June. Again, if you can, for some of the new people, because quite a few people joined in, what's the pros and cons of this, if there are any pros, Pete, to tearing this thing down, and how could have both the defense and the prosecution and the judge been on board with this?
I could only speculate that they're comfortable that all the scientific evidence and all the forensic evidence and any other evidence that might be found has been found, and there is no further need for further examinations, further inspections, further experts going through the house, and they're comfortable with that. But we don't know. You know, I haven't seen paperwork which would indicate that that was an issue before the court. So I don't, I'm speculating even if there was an issue raised. So.
Yeah. And again, that's a very good point because this is being reported by media outlets. But I have to say this. I went straight to someone who works for Washington State University. I had her on the show. Her name is Cindy. She got confirmation through Washington State University, and also if you go to the University of Idaho's website and you go to the president's webpage, he has a statement that this is what's happening. So I'd have to say it's a pretty strong yes, this is what's happening. I didn't hear any of the other things that I see in the chat that the owners took back ownership. Right. Again, this is all part of the package of online speculation. And
remember, the gag order prevents anyone from talking about it. So unless there's a court order or motions that are filed and put on the website, you don't know.
Right. Right. Hey, I'm going to be opening up the questions because we're coming to that 15-minute period. But before I do that, I have 6 questions that were sent in by some of our members. And we've covered this, but Pete, please be patient with me because we covered this early in the show. So somebody that's joining in might not have heard your answer to this. This question is for you, Pete. Can leaked unknown sources and information hurt the prosecution, and can it help the defense? This comes from Tina S. in Wisconsin.
Well, as we stated before, yes, it could help the defense because it may intimidate witnesses. It may cause other people not to come forward because they don't want to deal with the intense stress and pressure that being in the limelight would give. And those are just a few things off the top of my head, based upon prior experience. I mean, the fact of the matter is when you put something in the spotlight, it doesn't necessarily always help a case. Sometimes it makes a lot of people afraid who might have otherwise come forward. And it also raises speculation, which we discussed before, said could be the basis of a motion to change venue because you're now tainting the jury pool. And remember, there's only a certain number of people who are available to work on a jury. Between what they have to do in their lives, their jobs, and all that. There are a lot of excuses that may prevent certain people from being on a jury. And then when you add to that, they've been tainted by certain prejudicial information that they can't get out of their mind, that you have now made it potential for the defense to make a motion to change venue, which is never a good thing for the prosecution. The prosecution knows the people who are in the neighborhood. They know the type of people who are available. They know what those people's likes and dislikes are, what their history is. If you move the case now 300 or 400 miles away, you have a different pool of people who they're not familiar with.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so it could hurt. Again, we talked about the demolition. That came in from Cindy. Thank you, Cindy. We just talked about the demolition of the 1122 King Road homicide location. How likely? Again, we talked about how likely would there be a change of venue. That's another question. So we've hit a lot of these. One that we didn't hit on is coming in from also a good friend of ours from the United Kingdom. And she asks, Ann Taylor, she is the defense attorney for Bryan Kohberger. She is one of 2 capital punishment attorneys in the state of Idaho. She was just, I guess the court, I don't know if it's a lawful thing where they have to disclose the pay rate. It says Ann Taylor is to be paid $200 per hour and her co-counsel $180 per hour. Is this excessive? Thank you and thank you kindly. Okay, so she said thank you kindly. Love from Tiffany in United Kingdom. So that's from Tiffany. What's your thoughts on that pay rate? It's 3 times the scale of what they would normally get in a regular case, but this is probably going to be a capital punishment case.
Yeah, well, it's what we call 18B in New York State, which is that the county, it's an attorney who has agreed to work at a lesser rate. He's not privately retained; he's retained by the county, and the county has agreed to pay him that rate because that's what usually the state legislature has agreed to, has legislated. And usually capital punishment cases get the highest of the legislative rate because, it's a 24-hour, 7-day job when you're dealing with a person's life, obviously. And then the pressures that go with that, with a high profile case. So they usually get the highest rate that the county will pay. And that county rate is usually legislated by the state.
Right. But people were up in arms, Pete, because they were saying, well, the detectives and the prosecutor doesn't get paid double and quadruple for presenting these cases and for doing their job. Why should a defense attorney that's hired, that's actually appointed by the court, now make quadruple of what her normal pay rate is? And I could see that argument. But again, like you just stated, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of travel because she doesn't live locally. She's not from that local area. So she does have to make a lot of travel, and it is a tough job. And it entails a lot more than just a simple, a more simple case. This is going to be a capital punishment case.
And remember, it's one case where as a police officer, that's a career, and there are other factors that are, included in the salary, for instance, pension and the like, that those are factors that come into play. But I'm not saying that a police officer shouldn't be paid a lot more. It's just that in this particular case, there is a rate at which the state has determined is the reasonable rate to pay in this situation. So it's a matter of law that's been set up by the state.
Right. And it's not like they're just throwing out and picking out an arbitrary number. This is like you said.
That's sometimes in some situations, the judge may have the final approval on that too. And the judge can add or subtract. So it's not a done deal usually.
Hey, I want to just put this out there. We're going to take 1 or 2 calls. If someone wants to call in and ask Pete a question, there's the link in the chat. You could just call in with audio only. Keep it related to Bryan Kohberger, to his case, to the defense and/or prosecution side. Again, here I wanted to get to all these questions, so I'm going to ask this last question, and this one's an important one. I think. How important is protecting the one and only witness? Her initials are DM. Everybody knows her name. Don't put it in the chat. We don't speak. They've been asked not to mention her name, but DM is one of the surviving 2 roommates. She is the only person that is an eyewitness of Bryan. The suspect in this case. How important is protecting the only witness in this case?
It's critical. It's absolutely critical. And I would suspect that there are a lot of resources directed to that witness, to that witness's well-being and protection, not only to the witness, but the family of the witness. So I would suspect the DA and other agencies are helping to make sure that witness's well-being is a priority.
Absolutely. Yeah. Someone's saying in the background, yeah, Pete, I actually took about a half hour on one show to talk about the importance of that. And you're right, because not only is she subject to people, there's been a lot of vicious stuff going on about her. Like, why did Okay, so I think you probably know this. It took over 8 hours for them to call 911. So the murders occurred, according to the investigators, around 4 a.m. ish, right? Give or take some time. So 4 to 4:30 ish, and first responders weren't called until noon the next morning, Sunday morning. So this girl and the other surviving roommate have taken a tremendous amount of heat for that, especially since it's been put out there that she put eyes on this guy, a man dressed in all black with a mask on, and then went back into the room and went to sleep. So there's a lot of animosity from people towards her, and it's even more of a reason why, again, you want to be able to have her. How much on the percentage scale is the chances of her being summoned and called to testify? It's very high. It's probably 100%.
Absolutely.
Right? But if she has a breakdown or she is afraid or frightened, then that's going to be a whole nother workaround. So it's just so important. So important. So here's unpack that. She comes in with a question because everybody's chicken to come up and ask questions, Pete. So we have somebody in the studio. I'm going to add her in. Hi, Kristen. How are you?
Hey guys, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right.
Pete, you can hear her, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, here's what I learned, Ron. Every time you have that StreamYard, and if I don't have hair and makeup on, I'm just going to put this picture because at least here it is a selfie, but damn, it works.
It's a beautiful picture of you.
See? So everybody knows I can look normal and not like a person in Walmart.
Last time she came on, Pete, the reason she's saying this is the last time she came on, her hair was up and she had like a headband on, and she was saying, "Oh, my hair is wild and crazy." And I was like, "Well, look at mine. I have a bad hair day every day." So let me just show Popeye, because everybody heard the bird make some noise. So I'm going to show Popeye cam. There he is. That's my 35-year-old African gray. He's here in the studio with me. So
that's great.
There's a little bit of a Popeye cam.
What phrases have you taught him? Like, have you taught him anything cool?
This is a family channel. I can't go into that.
Please, thank you. That makes me happy. I was hoping you had done that.
He does say a lot of cool.
I love it.
What's your question for our counsel?
Peter, first of all, I have loved seeing you on the program before, and so to actually like jump on and be like, "Hey, how's it going?" It's kind of fun. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet of you.
This whole Kohberger BS and the Pennsylvania, warrant and the 4 gloves do you think any of this is really going to matter, or is this just more, clickbait? Because there's nothing else really to talk about, nothing else really going on in the case. Like, do you think that it's forensically or, as evidence, is it going to matter? Or is it just clickbait?
I don't know. At this point, I'm assuming that whatever they took, they will test to see if there's anything on there. They'll see whether it matches anything that they might have for whatever reason. But, they took it, so there's got to be a reason why they took it, as far as matching something or comparing it against something. But your guess is as good as mine.
Another thought on that is there anywhere, or has anyone seen what they took out of the dumpsters per se, or like what kind of evidence they gathered from that neighborhood? I've never seen anything. Ron, Pete, have you?
Yeah, no. So they just talked briefly, and it wasn't anything specific. They said that they took materials and items out of the neighbor's garbage. They didn't talk about the dumpsters adjacent to the buildings, of anything that's recovered from there. I would assume that we will hear about that when the trial commences. I don't think that, June 26th is going to be earth-shattering additional information. We may get, as Pete said, maybe some information there, because they still, they have to talk at that preliminary hearing about the case, right? but I don't think that they're going to be exposing their complete cards, Pete. And you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm no lawyer, but I feel that they may release a little bits here and there, but all of the important parts that they will use to prosecute Kohberger, they are not, unless they have to, going to expose that. Pete, thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I'd also say that, as an NYPD detective, you live the criminal justice system, so I'm sure you know a lot more than most attorneys who just deal with a little piece of it.
I've been in and out of court quite a bit, and I spent a lot of time in these search warrant returns. I've probably done maybe a little bit over 100 of these returns because I was in a unit for almost 4 years. All we did was search warrants. So
1% of the police department actually does investigations. So you're in that 1%, and people don't know that, but that's the nature of the beast. You have your A team, and the A team goes out all the time. It's just like in war. It's the same team that's on the front line all the time because the general knows they'll get the job done.
They're the ones that are reliable and you can count on.
Exactly.
But Pete knows it well because he worked in the district attorney's office. And when you're in the district attorney's office, you see the main players, the detectives, the real, like he said, the A team that goes out there and does this work. Where you have patrol cops, in a 40,000 or 35,000 member police department in New York City, you have, say, 25,000, 30,000 patrolmen. They're doing and making summary arrests. They're not doing the investigation. Whereas once I got promoted to detective, there's like 3,500 of us in the whole city, right?
Right.
So, out of those 3,500, you're going to have a good 2,000 that are really out there doing these heavy duty investigations. I have a super chat highlighted from Rain 16, sends in a $5 super chat. Thank you for your support. I've seen that the state of Idaho is talking about bringing back the firing squad. Yes, a Republican representative, Pete. I don't know. Did you catch on to this?
No.
I heard this too.
What was his name? It started with an S, but anyway,
It reminded me of Schmuck, but I know it wasn't.
It was like Schmooze. You're right. You know what, Kristen? You are awesome because it was. I was going to say something like that, but.
I'll say it.
He put together a bill, and it's pending now, in lieu of the lethal injection, to bring back the firing squad. So she's asking us for our thoughts on it. I'll tell you my thoughts on it. Listen, I'm a Catholic, and my aunt, my mother's sister, who's still alive, she's in her late 80s, early 90s. She's a Catholic nun, and the death penalty is a really touchy thing with us. And my aunt would string my neck, but I would say in a case like this, I would say, yeah. However the state deems legally that they are going to carry out a death penalty in this thing, if it was ever something where I would say yes, I wouldn't be a cheerleader and I wouldn't say charge, but I would say if they're going to bring back that firing squad, have at it. What about you, Pete?
Well, in New York, as you know, the death penalty was struck down.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no death penalty in New York State. When there was a death penalty, the legislature legislated that the defendant would be entitled to heightened due process. So essentially beyond a reasonable doubt plus before the death penalty would be invoked. So, that because of the finality of the situation, I'm in agreement with the heightened due process plus, but even that standard was struck down because they didn't think it could be applied in an equitable fashion.
So can I throw my 10 cents in here?
I was getting ready to go to you on this.
Were you? Oh, I figured you were like, no, she's a big mouth.
I should have went to ladies first, but go ahead. You got the floor.
All right. So my dad worked at Washington State Penitentiary, retired after 35 years. and he specifically worked the death row maximum IMU, what they called that. And so he, on 2 separate occasions, had to take individuals down to their last places. And I will tell you, he said lethal injection was one of the hardest things he had to watch. And the reason Washington did away with it, of course, is, you know, all the other pieces to it. And he said he wished they would have brought back firing squad because of the anonymity. I mean, maybe that's not the right word. You know, I have issues with words, but basically you've got 8 people. You don't know which one of you actually did it. Where the person who pushed the plunger had that trauma with them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. I agree. I mean, but any way you talk about this, you're going to have people who oppose it and people who are for it. So,
exactly.
But again, like I said, a quadruple murder like this, and I'm not even just singling out Ethan Chapin, Dana Canoto, Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan. I'm singling out anyone who does this type of heinous crime.
I'm with you.
There is a state that has this on the books, the death penalty. This is the case for it. This is what the death penalty is for. So
makes you a little I don't know if happy is the right term, but maybe glad he didn't commit this in Washington.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a difficult topic to talk about. And again, I appreciate everybody in the chat for being respectful for it. But I want to wrap it up because Pete, we talked about $180, $200 an hour. His is $750 an hour, and I'm on overtime with him. So I can't afford this guy.
Aren't you glad I'm free?
You're free and you can hang out all you want. Let's go to the chat for 2 seconds because I put you on and I want to just go to the chat for a second. K-Max says, thank you, DutyRon. This case has really got me fascinated and wondering and anxious. Listen, a lot of people are just the amount of time that it's going to take to get to June, and June is not the promised land. June 26th, going into the summer months. What happens to a lot of courts in the summer months, Pete?
They close down.
So is there a chance that this trial commences over the summer of 2023?
Probably not.
Probably not. So you heard it here first on Crime Time with DutyRon. Don't get yourselves all worked up because we're in this for the long haul. Yeah. And the amount of information that's going to come out on June 26th is probably not going to be something that's going to quench your appetite or your thirst. You guys are all going to be waiting. This is going to be the long haul, folks. And the rumors and all of the unverified sourced information, get ready, buckle yourselves in because it's going to be a roller coaster ride. That's for sure. Pete, I want to thank you for taking out an hour and 8 minutes of your time.
Thank you.
Will you come back?
Thank you. It was great to meet you. Well, kind of.
Yeah.
Great seeing you too. I love that picture.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Do you want to show them a before and after?
No. No,
all right.
I really do. I mean, if we want to do that, you're going to be scared and not be able to sleep tonight. So I don't think we'll do that, Pete.
Kristen, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to let you go, and then me and Pete are going to sign off.
All right. See you guys. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for being brave. She was the only brave one. And I shared the link to join us about 4 times. So nobody wanted to come up. Pete, I thank you so much for taking out the time. You have a busy law practice. You are a busy man. And whenever I reach out to you, 9 times out of 10, you say, let's do it. And that's what I love about the relationship. And I want to get together with you and Joe Murray and go out and have a dinner. I'm going to keep saying it. And if I have to do it, just me and you, then we'll take pictures and we'll send them to Joe and we'll give him the middle finger. We'll give him the middle finger.
We'll take pictures of the food. That'll really kill him.
Listen, we take pictures of the food and the middle finger.
Yes.
That'll be it. That'll be it. So, Joe, you're on notice. We're putting him on notice. The court is giving notice to Joe Murray. Get yourself together and let's get out for a dinner. Pete, I want to just give you the final words on this case. Just for the audience here, my people are so engaged in this, but they are educated, and I think you really help people understand a lot tonight. but could you just give them a little bit of maybe what your thoughts are of how you perceive this case going forward?
Well, I think that, as you had said before, this is going to be a slow moving scenario, and people should be prepared that they will get bits and pieces, because that's what usually happens until the trial. So preliminary hearing, you're not going to get much. You might get some on discovery if they post it on the website. I would say keep an eye out on the website also. You get little bits and pieces, but stay tuned to this show, because DutyRon will be on top of it.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it. You are definitely a asset to Crime Time with DutyRon and the community here. So we'll be checking back in with you really soon. Again, on behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon, Ed Wallace, happy birthday. It's now a little bit past, but happy birthday, my brother. I hope you have many, many more healthy and happy ones. And we will see you, me and Pete, we'll catch you guys on the next live stream. On behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon, Pete Crusco, we will talk to you soon. Peace and love from DutyRon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.